for American people, harmed small businesses, and alienated our allies. We cannot build a 21st century economy on 20th century failures. Mr. Secretary, after decades of forever war in the Middle East, President Trump promised the American people no new wars, only to send a new generation of troops back to the Middle East. We've traded dialogue for bombs yet again. And where does that leave us today? The Iranian regime still has its missiles, its drones, its proxies, and its nuclear material. There is an Ayatollah still in power, only he's younger. With the IRGC more entrenched and more hardline. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. It wasn't before you started this war. It wasn't before we lost 14 American troops, before American bombs killed 168 Iranian schoolgirls, before Americans were forced to spend over $100 billion on this war. You helped spin the perfect pretext for this war and then failed to prepare American embassies and citizens when the bombs started falling. Those who have defended and enabled this war share direct responsibility for the economic pain American families are bearing as a result. Our allies knew this war was ill-advised, and that's why they are sitting on the sidelines while Gulf energy infrastructure and American bases take incoming. Trump said America first. Now America's alone. In our hemisphere, talk of reasserting dominance has meant illegally abducting, installing one autocrat in place of another without due process, creating civilian population. American leadership, American value. Behavior, we built the rules-based order to prevent. The Trump administration's attack on foreign aid and efforts remain equally destructive and regressive. This administration directly contributed to famine in South Sudan, to the latest Ebola outbreak, and real HIV rates are rising. Mr. Secretary, these countries result of hundreds of thousands of children, and we cannot protect Americans by forgetting what ignoring it cost us. So, Mr. Secretary, on climate and energy.
Ranking members, other members of the committee, that opening for the record. We're pleased to have Secretary of State Marco Rubio before us today. Also part of the record, I'll ask you to keep your spoken remarks to 5 minutes in order to allow time for member questions. Recognize Secretary Rubio for your opening statement.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Ranking Member Committee, for having me. I have a written statement. I'll try to cut the 5 minutes in half if I can. Let's just get right to the point. I think that I would characterize 16, 17 months at the State Department as two things: a history of tremendous successes combined with ongoing and difficult challenges. And we will always have ongoing and difficult challenges in the world. Let me walk through them one by one. India and Pakistan were on the verge of an all-out war. The State Department and I personally were involved in conflict and bringing it to an end, a war between two nuclear powers. Thailand and Cambodia were involved in a war. Cambodia, a country we haven't normally had close relations with in a very long time. The U.S., the president personally played a pivotal role, not once, but twice, restoring ceasefires and ending that conflict. Obviously, the war in Gaza, not only that, but all the hostages that were both the body. Azerbaijan, that conflict ended. Not only did it end, but it ended with an agreement that I signed the MOU on yesterday, creating a route, the trip route, with ordinary opportunities for both countries, especially for Armenia, while respectively benefit from that. The Shield of the, that means over 14 countries in the hemisphere have signed up on counterterrorism, counter-narcotics, and security matters. And we believe that that number will grow over the next few months as elections change leaderships in various countries. We held a rare earths ministerial that was a odd countries from around the world for an American-led effort that critical supplies of rare earth minerals around the world, our emerging economy, and we don't remain over China. We also announced the Pax Silica proposal, which is growing, but it's at 14 members now. These are 14 countries that are cooperating with one another to protect the supply chains critical to aid in the future. In Venezuela, we now have an embassy. We have people traveling there for the first time. It's not where it needs to be, but it is a long ways from where it was 5 months ago, and poses not nearly the threat it once posed to America's national security. We're not satisfied with where it is, but we've come a long way. We're certainly better off than we were 5 months ago. On Nigeria, where many were very concerned about violence against Christians. We are now actively in counterterrorism cooperation with the Nigerian government forces, including a joint operation to cut out the number 2 leader of global ISIS operating from inside of the country, and that continues. The Pacific Islands, small Pacific Islands under constant China, have received more attention from this administration than they've received in the last 10 years. Combined deliverables are coming along. Quad, an important alliance in the Indo-Pacific between India, Japan, Australia. We've had multiple meetings of that group, including a meeting just last week in India, occur later this year, including a leaders meeting before the end of the year. As I speak to you on Executive Day, and for the first time in many, the leaders from the government of Israel State Department for the second day, and hopefully today produce a joint statement and an action plan on a track for security in that country, independent from Hezbollah, independent from nefarious influence. They had similar meetings last week at the Pentagon at the military level. We have signed 32 health compacts. 32 countries have signed health compacts with the United States, where our aid to those countries will not just be dollars distributed to an NGO who then will go into the countries. Instead, we are partnering with 32 countries, African continent, in which we will in domestic health industries and national health systems, so that they can not only are we treating the acute situations on the ground, build the capability to do this for themselves. This is what these countries want. They do not want to be Europeans. They want to take care of their people one day, and we are helping of our aid to build that infrastructure. I could go on, but let me just say another point. We are better today than we have ever to relief. Today, the United States can respond to disasters around the world on a humanitarian basis faster and more effectively than they ever have, because of our reorg is our response in Jamaica, our response to 2 typhoons in the Pacific, our ability to quickly deploy within 24 hours and bring aid directly, coordinating with the government better than it has ever been, because we cut out bureaucracy, we cut out the middleman, and we went right to the point. We still have challenges. On Sudan, remains a very frustrating situation. We've remained deeply engaged with the Quad in these negotiations. Many of you are aware, unfortunately, Sudan, a proxy war between and the divisions between the UAE and Saudi Arabia have truly complicated our ability. And what we're focused on there now is identifying 4 cities, 2 on each side, that will serve as points of distribution for humanitarian aid. But the inability, the real frustrating thing about one side or the other will agree, will not comply. But we remain focused on that, and we have people that work on that full time. We even had just about a month and a half ago where we hundreds of millions of dollars in pledges for not just humanitarian aid, but reconstruct on that. It's an ongoing challenge. On DRC and Rwanda, they signed a peace agreement. Unfortunately, compliance has not been good. With a few sanctions on the Rwandan side, we are starting to see some compliance. It's moving, not moving fast enough, but we're hoping to see compliance at some point in the middle part of next month. And troops from there, of course, we still have the M23 problem that has to be addressed. So this is a host of issues we could go on. Obviously, the ongoing challenges of Iran remain, as I'm sure we'll speak in your questions today. So I apologize, that took 4 minutes and 55 seconds, but I tried to talk as fast as I could. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Rubio. I now recognize Ranking Member Meeks for 5 minutes of questions.
I'm going to ask you to answer my questions quickly, because clearly the chairman wants to protect you. That's why he's cutting me off my opening statement. But Secretary,
you had 5 minutes.
Secretary, you have the honor of serving both the acting National Security Advisor and Secretary of State. In these roles, you've played a central role in advising the president as Commander-in-Chief, the launch of war against Iran, and the impacts of this choice have been significant on our allies and partners who immediately have targeted by retaliatory strikes, as well as for Americans here at home. 3 months into this war, gas and food prices are up, inflation is rising, American business owners and farmers are struggling from higher shipping and commodity costs, and yet the president said 2 weeks ago, and I quote, "I don't think about Americans' financial situation." That's a quote that should alarm every American. Americans are also rightfully concerned that while they struggle with affordability due to the war in Iran, the president of the United States is busy day trading on it. He disclosed purchases of stocks in energy and defense companies in the first quarter of this year that were made just as those companies' profits were soaring from the war in Iran. On March 23rd, the same day he reversed his threat to strike Iranian energy, infrastructure, and energy stocks rose. He brought stocks then in Phillips 66, Exxon, and Chevron. Secretary, I have a few questions, and again, given the amount of time that I have, I will ask you to give me yes and no answers. Did you warn President Trump before the war in Iran began that this conflict would drive up costs on gas, food, travel, and shipment?
Yeah, I'll
yes
warn you
no?
right now, I don't do yes or no answers.
Yeah,
So
well,
these
I
are
only have
complex
5
questions.
minutes. I know when
Oh,
you
so
were
do
the
I.
senator, you know
I
about
never
this
did yes or
business,
no answers
and I
to
know
people.
you're trying to go out so that you can run out my 5 minutes. That's a simple
I'm not gonna
question.
run out your 5 minutes. You're running out your 5 minutes.
Did you?
I don't do yes or no question. You want to ask me a question? I'll answer.
I'm
your
answering.
question.
You answer my question. It's my time. Did you?
Did I what?
Yes or no? Did you warn President Trump
The president
before
was
the
fully-
Iran war began that this conflict would drive up costs on gas, food, travel, and shit?
The president,
yes or no?
The president and the full administration was aware that there would be consequences to action, but the consequences
Let
of
me
Iran
move
having
on.
a nuclear weapon were worse.
Did you warn him? Did you warn him that launching a war in Iran could result in the regime placing a chokehold on the Strait of Hormuz?
All the risk factors were understood, but the most important risk
I
factor
just
was
want to know if
Iran
you did
cannot
your
have a
job.
nuclear
Did you
weapon.
warn him?
Iran
If
cannot
you
have
didn't
a
warn him,
nuclear
say
weapon.
yes. It's simple.
Everyone was aware of what Iran might
Did you
do in
warn him?
retaliation.
I'm asking you a second. Did you
Everyone
warn
was
him?
aware.
Don't
of
want to
what
answer that. Let
Iran
me ask
would
you the
do.
next question.
But the worst part is
Did
that
you
they
warn
can't
the
have a nuclear-
president that launching U.S. strikes against Iran would result in retaliatory attacks on U.S. allies, partners, and Americans living or working in the Middle East?
Everyone
Yes
understood
or
what
no?
Iran would do in response.
Did you warn them?
We were prepared for any response that
You
they
want-
came out with.
okay.
We knew it,
Just want to make
but
sure.
they can't have a nuclear
So
weapon.
you said you warned them. Did you warn the president that the personal stock purchases and companies profiting from the war that he launched could present a conflict of interest?
I'm not aware of the president's stock purchases. I don't deal in that, and I don't even know what you're saying is true.
Well, we know that because it is made public what his stock purchases were.
You say so. I don't read the president's
All right, so-
financial disclosure, but I don't believe that to be true.
Well, I think then the president should be more transparent. Secretary Rubio, because these are basic questions that I'm asking you, and to be transparent with the American people. This is what this is all about, the transparency. So, for example, when you go and look at some of your statements that you made in regards to Cuba, I only have 58 seconds left, and I'd love to get it, but you talked about Gaisa, who's controlling the military and what's taking place there, and that they have the opportunity to benefit while the Cuban people are suffering. So what we're seeing here now, the one person that's benefited from this war by his purchase of stocks, him and his friends, they have made billions of dollars while the American people are suffering. You've accused, and I agree, with reference to some folks, what they're doing in Cuba and how they're making money while people suffer. That's what's taking place in the United States of America. The Trump administration and his friends are making billions of dollars while the American people suffer. And they continue to suffer.
Breaks my
as
heart, but
gas
ranking
prices
member's time
go
has
up.
expired. Representative McCall is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me thank you for your service. Secretary, I know you're wearing a lot of hats, a lot of responsibilities. I think you're doing an outstanding job. Let me just say, since 1979, a dark veil of terror descended upon the Middle East, and we've had it ever since. And every president since that time has said that a nuclear Iran is not acceptable. And every Congress has said that. In fact, last Congress, when I was chairman of this committee, I passed a resolution that said that a nuclear Iran was unacceptable and that the U.S. must use any means necessary to prevent them from obtaining a nuclear weapon. The vast majority of Democrats voted for this. Almost all Republicans. It passed the House floor, a resolution stating that that is not acceptable. We've had a lot of talk in these Congresses and prior administrations, a lot of talk, but we haven't had a whole lot of action. Your administration, you, sir, and the president have taken action on this very dire, dangerous situation we find ourselves in with Iran obtaining a nuclear weapon. I also want to applaud you for your efforts in this Western Hemisphere. A free Venezuela, a free people, possibly one day a free Cuba. When people don't realize Iran is in this hemisphere, and Russia is in this hemisphere, and China is in this hemisphere, this is all kind of tied together in a coherent foreign policy strategy that I see. So I want to give you, sir, to respond to that, because again, all talk and no action. But you, sir, have put this into action.
Thank you. Well, let me just, before I address that, the ranking member made accusations against the president, which I've never heard before, but number one, are completely false. Not once, just to be clear, not a single time, not even for a millisecond, has the president ever discussed his personal economics in relations to war or any public policy that he's made for that matter. And I've been in every one of his foreign policy meetings for the most part. As to your point, what we need to understand is exactly what you just said. It's not just that we say they can't have a nuclear weapon. Everyone says they can't have a nuclear weapon. The Chinese say they can't have a nuclear weapon. The Russians agree they couldn't have a nuclear weapon. But at a point, you have to do something about it. What Iran was trying to do was build a conventional shield of drones and missiles and a navy and capabilities. At some point, they would say to the world, now we're going to get a nuclear weapon, and you can't do anything about it because we have so many weapons and so many drones and so many naval vessels that the price we will inflict on you for trying to do something about it makes us untouchable, makes us immune. And the president was not going to allow them to build a conventional shield behind which they can develop their nuclear program. Today, the Iranian Navy sits at the bottom of the sea. They do not have a Navy. It no longer exists. They have no Air Force either. Their missile launchers have been significantly degraded. Their defense industrial base has suffered upwards of 80 to 90% of attrition. It will take years for them to rebuild it. Those are facts. That is the reality. That was the purpose of Epic Fury. It achieved its purpose in degrading that conventional shield. And it has brought them to the negotiation table that hopefully will lead to the point where Iran will give up its enrichment ambitions, will turn over the highly enriched uranium, will stop sponsoring terrorism around the world.
You know, and I think the goal should be the fulfillment of the Abraham Accords. We know why October 7th happened, because Israel and Saudi were getting very, very close, in Iran's perspective, dangerously close to a normalization agreement. And what did Iran do? They lit up their proxies. They lit up their proxies to stop that from happening. I do foresee a free Iran. I do foresee a free Venezuela and a free Cuba, but you have to start somewhere. And I think we're taking the steps so that future generations will thank us for these actions.
Look, and on the point of, we would love to see a change in Iran and that they be governed by people, but that was not the goal of our mission. The goal of our mission was to take away their ability to threaten the region with an overwhelming number of missiles and drones that would basically make them immune to any sort of external pressure. And then they could break out to a nuclear weapon. That was the goal. It achieved that from a military perspective. The reality of it remains that it's not just us. The entire world says they can't have a nuclear weapon, but no one wanted to do anything about it. And I can tell you this, they are not going to have a nuclear weapons program, at least as long as President Trump is in the White House. That's been made clear to everyone in the administration from the very top down. It was the motivation behind these actions, and it's the reason why we engaged the way we did.
I want to thank you again in the last 10 seconds for your service. I would hope we could unify as a nation behind this. I would hope our allies would unify behind us on this, because they've all said it as we have said it in the past, and yet it was all talk and no action.
Representative's time has expired. Representative Keating is recognized.
Chairman, for the record, I ask unanimous consent to submit the President's financial disclosure form, which will detail those dealings that were referred to by the ranking member.
Without objection.
Secretary, Thank you for being here. In conjunction with your job, you're also the National Security Advisor with access to the most sensitive intelligence secrets our countries and other countries have in the world. But before this, you had these two positions. You had a distinguished career as a member and a chair for 5 years of the Senate Intelligence Committee up to last year. And you and Senator Warner are some of the most respected and knowledgeable people at that time and voices in the entire intelligence community, earning the trust of Democrats and Republicans alike, Senator and House members, and other countries. So with all your Intelligence Committee experience, and now as Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, and all those years of experience, have you ever, specifically in the context of the intelligence community, heard the name Bill Pulte?
In the context of intelligence?
That's what I said.
No, I have
Never heard his name. Okay, thank you for answering that.
Well,
Never even heard his name. Given all your years of experience and your position now, never heard the name. For the record, Bill Pulte is a person Donald Trump has chosen for the acting director of national intelligence with no experience in the intelligence field, whose misuse, and widely reported, of confidential information led to the prosecution of the president's political enemies, is now the person in charge of the nation's most closely guarded intelligence when he couldn't even conduct himself appropriately as the federal housing finance director. Now, Secretary, have you ever heard of the name Ira Zahari?
Who's that?
You've never heard the name Ira Zahari?
I mean, it doesn't ring a bell off the top.
In the context of security? Well, let me tell you. Mr. Zahari pleaded guilty for breaking into the Capitol on January 6th through a broken window, wielding a metal rod as a weapon. And Donald Trump appointed him to a team at the Pentagon focused on irregular warfare and, of all things, counterterrorism. That's ironic, given that he participated in one of the most significant incidents of domestic terror in our country's history. I think it's shameful, the people that are being appointed, and I think it's also shameful, some of the people that have been fired. Now, I want to move to Iran because given your nuclear and intelligence background, which is extensive and appreciated and respected, I'm sure you're aware that Ukraine, the country at the time with the third largest nuclear arsenal, peacefully turned over their nuclear weapons in conjunction with the Budapest Memorandum and in exchange for the U.S. commitment to defend Ukraine if it ever came under threat. The U.S. gave their word to Ukraine they would defend them. And I found this amazing. In your opening remarks, as you took us all over the world, and you mentioned 15 different incidents where you have interceded, 15, the top 15. Not once did you mention Ukraine when you were prioritizing the achievement that's there. Now, let me go on.
Tried to stay under
Let
5
me go
minutes.
on. Oh, you tried to stay. Yeah, please.
Well, I
It's
can
not
answer
funny.
that.
It's not funny, Secretary. Now,
What's not funny
in
is
Iran
that-
now,
Well, you don't.
in
this
Iran
is- you
now,
can't even
I
answer
reclaim
questions
my
here.
time. I reclaim my time, Mr. Chairman.
You guys
He's
make these
interrupting me.
statements and no
He
one
is
can respond.
interrupting me. I'm doing it. I'm asking you to reclaim those seconds back.
No.
Now in Iran, what goes around comes around, Mr. Chairman. Now in Iran, the Trump administration issues a general license to Russia, providing billions in oil profits every month, several billion every month, fueling Putin's war machine. You didn't mention that in your opening remarks. And then this is a war of aggression of Russia attacking Ukraine, to which we gave our agreement. And this is to a country that's assisting us in Iran, Ukraine, and helping a country with a war machine that are aiding Iran against us and putting our service members in jeopardy. Look, we have an opportunity as members just today to vote on the Ukraine Support Act. I hope we do it. And I am confident that we have bipartisan support. But I hope this administration would act on its own. They could do things themselves that you didn't mention, like rescind these general licenses, complete a bilateral drone agreement with Ukraine, provide direct military assistance that has access to the Ukraine, implement comprehensive sanctions packages.
Representative
and condemn
time has expired.
the aggression.
Representative
Thank you,
Smith
Mr.
of
Chairman,
New
for
Jersey
taking
is
up
recognized.
my time and squandering it. That's not how a chairman should act.
Representative Smith, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, if you need a moment to respond to
Well, I also didn't mention Cuba because I literally hand wrote what I was going to say to you guys, and I told you I was going to submit the written for the record. And I think everybody understands Cuba is a priority for me. Just on the Ukraine front, I'll address it now if it's okay with your time that I could do so. I think it's well documented that we've been very involved in trying to get the two sides to the table. We've invested a lot of time in it. Unfortunately, so to this point, neither side has been willing to make concessions, particularly on the Russian side, necessary in order to bring peace about. We remain ready to play any role we can in that context of bringing a peace about, because we think the war in Ukraine, devastating war, has no military solution. It can only be solved through a diplomatic route, and it's been unfruitful. I would characterize it as the ongoing challenges. That said, let's be clear, we are not, to be fair and to be frank, we are not impartial mediators in that war. Okay, we don't provide weapons to Russia. We only provide weapons to Ukraine. We don't impose sanctions on Ukraine. We only impose sanctions on Russia. So we have clearly taken a side. We continue to sell weapons to Ukraine, by the way, through the Pearl program, unimpeded by what's happened in the Middle East or anywhere else. And look, we'd love to see that come to a negotiated settlement. As of right now, the prospects don't look great that either side is prepared to make the concessions necessary in order to reach an agreement. But we stand ready. And we've engaged and invested a tremendous amount of high-level time on that conflict over the last year. I think it's a source of frustration for the world. Hopefully this year will bring better news. I don't have any news for you on that front today, but we are ready. As I've expressed to both sides repeatedly, we're ready to step in and play whatever positive role we can to bring that devastating and escalating war to an end.
Mr. Secretary, thank you very much. And just let me say, Claire and Sebastian Lai and all of us are deeply grateful to you and the president for everything you tried to do to get Jimmy Lai out. Obviously, it's an ongoing concern, and I know you will continue to push for that. But I know you did everything. The ball was in Xi Jinping's court, and he unfortunately erred on the side of continued incarceration of that great human rights defender. But thank you for that. Let me say on the Iran deal, I remember sitting right here and on the floor of the House talking about how egregiously flawed the deal was 10 years ago when the Ayatollah was able to get the language dealing with ballistic missiles out of it because he said it would be stupid, his words, and then they built ballistic missiles like never before. On them never having, Iran never having a nuclear weapon, let's not forget that the agreement was in effect until October of this past year. Other nations were still a part of it, and yet they were building a capacity to create nuclear weapons and to use them. And the MAD theory does not apply to them, as we all know. Unlike Russia, Soviet Union in the past, even China, they don't want to be destroyed. With the Iranians, there's this sense of martyrdom that I think is perverse. And so they are not guided by a mutual assured destruction theory that holds both sides in check. Let me just say too on the Nigeria, thank you for what you've done there with not just CPC, but the most recent taking out of some of the worst terrorists who are slaughtering Christians, and the numbers continue. But I know you're engaging very, very aggressively there. On the DRC-Rwanda conflict, thank you for sanctioning some of the top people who are committing atrocities. And that just happened a couple of days ago, yesterday, for sure. That shows that commitment there. And on even the Armenian Azerbaijan, I've been working on Nagorno-Karabakh, Azerbaijan and Armenia for 30 years. They often called Nagorno-Karabakh the frozen conflict because nothing would ever happen. You guys stepped in, and the president stepped in and got a peace treaty. I mean, I've met with Aliyev in Baku on 2 occasions. He was totally unwilling to admit to the human rights abuses that he was engaging in, especially as it relates to Nagorno-Karabakh and Armenians. You've come up with a solution. Thank you for that. And anything you want to speak to on the DRC, Rwandan, or any of these issues, appreciate everything you're doing for this country. There's a full plate of horrible things happening, and we're so grateful you're at the helm. Please.
Oh, well, I just on DRC Rwanda, I would say, because just to elaborate on that a little further, as you know, we had an agreement signed and the compliance was not good in that regard. But to be fair, and I know that some other people disagree with this assessment, but we believe it's pretty accurate on the Rwandan side. And so we initiated some sanctions, targeted sanctions on Rwanda. They've come to the table. They've made some commitments. They are complying with the commitments, maybe not at the rate or speed that we'd like them to, but there's been some compliance on pulling back of troops. But we'll watch very closely, of course, is we don't want to see Rwandan troops change uniform into M23 uniforms and claim that they've pulled out. We got to watch that very carefully. And we also have to deal with the M23 issue there. But those are both DRC, Rwanda, and Sudan are two areas we remain very engaged in trying to find a solution to.
Representative's time has expired. Representative Castro, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for coming in today and for your testimony. I want to start with Iran. I'm hopeful that the president and the administration are able to reach an agreement that ends the war and also reopens the Strait of Hormuz. If there's a deal subject to congressional review under INARA, I'll approach it with a fair mind, and I hope that all of us will as well. I just ask that you keep the committee briefed on the details of that agreement, and I believe that it's in America's interest that this war end, and I sincerely mean that. We are at war alongside Israel against Iran. Iran has struck Israeli nuclear facilities at Dimona, and American service members are deployed throughout the region, as you know. Congress needs to understand the full risks of the conflict, including the nuclear risks. On May 4th, I wrote to you with 29 colleagues asking for details about these risks and Israeli nuclear weapons. On June 1st, your Bureau of Legislative Affairs responded and said, quote, "We refer you to the government of Israel for your questions about Israel's capabilities." I have to say, Mr. Secretary, that's a very bizarre response. 30 of us wrote to you and to the State Department asking our government for an answer and assessment about a foreign nation's nuclear capabilities. In your opening statement, you referred to India and Pakistan as nuclear nations. We've also spoken in different sessions, both in closed and open sessions, you know, as a U.S. Senator, former U.S. Senator, about the nuclear capabilities of other nations, Iran, China, Russia, France, the UK, both adversaries and allies. And so I wanted to ask you the question today, will you tell us, the Congress and the American people, whether Israel in fact possesses nuclear weapons?
You know that's a question that they've never acknowledged to have a nuclear program. People can have, as you know, an open source and other reporting suspicions about what they possess. If we're speaking frankly, I think most of the world assesses that they do, but they've never acknowledged that publicly. And as a feature of our foreign policy, for a variety of reasons, we don't discuss it in that way either.
Well, I guess a few things. This is the first time, especially for an extended period, that we are at war with an ally, Israel, against Iran. And we have service members deployed. And we don't, if they in fact possess weapons, and you're right, in open source reporting that has come across, we don't know what their red lines are for using those nuclear weapons. And so I guess I'm shocked that our government wouldn't make an effort to know, to understand, and then to give our oversight body the information that we need to make decisions about the war as well.
That's a fair observation. And I would answer that if perhaps you make that request and you're open to it being answered in a different setting other than a public
Classified setting? A classified setting?
Yes, and both classified and sensitive. And if we could, I think you would get a better response to your question if the context in which it was answered were framed differently than a public letter for a variety of reasons. If we're being mature and grown up here, I mean, foreign policy, and I know that you are, and from the tone of your question, it's clear that it's a serious question. These things require delicate balancing acts between different equities, but I think you can get probably a more fulsome answer if we were to be able to respond to that inquiry in a different context, if that makes sense.
Mr. Secretary, I'll certainly take you up on that, and I appreciate your answer. Thank you for that. I have another question on Lebanon. The president and you are working to end this war with Iran, and according to reporting at least, one of the main sticking points is Israel's continuing military campaign in Lebanon against Hezbollah, which the president has called on Israel to stop. The president confirmed last night, in fact, that he in fact told Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu to stop the war in Lebanon. My worry is that Israel's insistence on continuing this war against Hezbollah will jeopardize the president's efforts and the American government's efforts to reach an agreement with Iran. And so my question is, do you agree that Israel should stop its military campaign in Lebanon and support the president's negotiations for a peace agreement with Iran?
I'd love to answer that question. It's going to take more than the 42 seconds. And I know I've seen already that people get pretty pissed off here when their time gets eaten up. But if I can answer that question, maybe the next person will let me continue, because that's a really important question. So let me just start by saying this. Let me walk you through this. We had an agreement. Hezbollah reached out 2 weeks ago and basically said, about 10 days ago, and basically said, we will not launch missiles into Israeli territory if they stop attacking into Beirut. That was the agreement, I think 5 p.m. 2 Saturdays ago. At 6 p.m., they launched missiles. And then they came back and said, well, we made a mistake. We thought it started tomorrow, not Saturday. Then they went again and violated it again on Sunday.
But also Israel has been bombing and launching throughout. Is that
Well,
correct?
there's two separate things. Actually, Israel has not conducted massive operations in Beirut for some time. What you see them operating is in the south. And what they are, what we've always said, and it's part of the joint statement, we've always said is Israel has a right to act in its defense. So as an example.
Well, but so then why did the president have to tell Israel to stop
Time has
anything?
expired. Representative Wilson's reference.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Indeed, Mr. Secretary, I want to thank you and recognize that we appreciate the U.S.-Israel alliance, and we appreciate very much the response that's being done against 1,100 missile attacks that have come out of Lebanon, as you've just identified correctly, and they need to know that, and how they don't know that, I don't know. But any attacks that are done by Israel are in response, not initiated. With that in mind, you are serving at a historic time with successive dictators on the run. Dictator Assad of Syria has fled to Moscow. Dictator Maduro of Venezuela is incarcerated in Manhattan. Dictator Khomeini of Iran has been eliminated, joining the 40,000 Iranians he murdered this year. As chairman myself of the Helsinki Commission for Security and Cooperation in Europe, you have achieved unprecedented unity in Latin America, supporting the liberation of Venezuela and soon Cuba. You have achieved historic unity across the Middle East of all countries, supporting American efforts, except for the Republic of Georgia, to oppose Iran and its nuclear capabilities. And in Europe, NATO and the EU are united as never before, promoting defense increases for peace through strength to indeed promote Ukraine victory over war criminal Putin. With that in mind, another region is the South Caucasus, which is critical of the opportunity for the Trump route that you've achieved with Prime Minister Pashinyan of Armenia and President Aliyev of Azerbaijan. What a great achievement that is. With that in mind, though, the pro-Iranian regime and the Chinese Communist Party supported Georgian Dream government, which is illegitimate, threatens American access. There was a rigged election in Georgia. With that in mind, they're facilitating the Islamic Revolutionary Guard and evading sanctions to Tehran. What do you believe should be done to address the rapidly expanding radicalization promoted by the Georgian Dream government in the Republic of Georgia?
Let me, if I may, I want to answer the Georgia question.
You
Can I
all the
steal
above.
30 seconds of your time to finish the answer to
all the
Representative
above.
Castro? So on Georgia, you're right. Everything you just outlined is our pre-existing concern. Since that time, they have made some steps indicating to us that they want to improve their relations with the United States. We've outlined to them what that would take and what that would require. We've received some positive responses. And so our hope is that we can see a change of trajectory in the case of Georgia from where it is today. We obviously understand all the things you just laid out as being pre-existing problems for us. They've asked us, what will it take to have a better relationship with the United States? We've responded, and hopefully we can build on that basis and perhaps change the trajectory, not just of our relationship with Georgia, but of their behavior. Is it okay if I just take 30 seconds of your time? I apologize. So on the strikes that you're referring to, here's what happens in the South. I'm just going to speak colloquially as best I can. The Israelis see Hezbollah moving around, maybe even launching a missile from the south, and they action it in defense. They go after it in the southern portion. And that's what we're seeing in many cases is these defensive strikes. What they're increasingly doing is taking more territory in the south to deny them launching space. Because understand, these rockets are being launched into northern villages and cities in Israel, and populations can't even return to their homes as a result of it. In the case of what happened the other day, the following was happening. We had indications, multiple indications, that Israel may be considering conducting anti-Hezbollah strikes inside of Beirut. And at that moment, we had reach out from the Lebanese authorities saying that Hezbollah had contacted them and said, if Israel doesn't strike Beirut, that they would stop launching missiles into Israeli territory. That's the message we got, and that's what the president pursued and said, okay, I had this outreach. If you won't do these strikes in Beirut, they'll stop launching against you in northern Israel. Unfortunately, within an hour or two of that conversation, they launched 2 waves of rockets from Hezbollah against Israel in Israeli territory. So it's an ongoing challenge. I think one of the reasons why we're engaged in these talks between Lebanon and Israel is understanding that Hezbollah is not just an enemy of Israel. Hezbollah is an enemy of Lebanon. They are an enemy of the Lebanese government. They have called for the overthrow of the Lebanese government. When Lebanon expelled the Iranian ambassador, he refused to leave. He said, I'm not leaving. You can't expel me. Hezbollah is protecting me. So Hezbollah is not just a challenge to Israel. It's a challenge to Lebanon, to the Lebanese state and the Lebanese people. And we are hopeful that we can create a paradigm in which Lebanon's government and Israel can work together to disarm Hezbollah and allow the people of Lebanon to reclaim its country. But it's complex. This has been going on since OJ had isotoners and those commercials. So.
And Mr. Secretary, you're correct. I was with President Aoun in Beirut last year, and that what you're doing is should address it. I do want to point out, give Syria a chance, and that's been your success, Tom Barrack, the president, giving Syria a chance. We need to delist Syria from the state sponsor of terrorism, and I urge that to be done.
Thank you for being so generous for Representative Castro's question. Representative Titus is recognized.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I just want to talk about some of the conflicting comments that we've been hearing about the status of Iran's military. The president just made some comments on Fox News where he said Iran's military, we sort of left it alone because we think that their military is somewhat moderate. We've taken different forms of leadership out, but we've actually left their military alone. People would be surprised to hear that. Well, I'm very surprised to hear it because we've had Secretary Hegseth say repeatedly that Epic Fury decimated Iran's military and rendered it combat ineffective for years to come. You've said the Iranian Navy is at the bottom of the sea and they have no Air Force either. Well, which is it? You're the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor. If you can't tell us if the military's decimated or not, is it at the bottom of the sea? Was it left alone? This is a major point I think Congress needs clarity on.
Okay, thank you. Fair question. Let me address both of them. The first is on the military. I think there's a difference between the military's hardware and capabilities and the individuals involved in the military. As you know, the Iranians suffered tremendous losses in personnel, and that includes top leadership of the IRGC and other elements of their government. What the president is alluding to is that there are certain individuals in the Iranian regime who have indicated both directly and indirectly a willingness to approach the future perhaps a little different. Not ideal. I'm not telling you, look, everybody talks about moderates in Iran. There are no moderates. There are radicals and super radicals, okay? That's been our view of it. But there are some of them that believe that they actually need to do a deal because their economy is in shambles. And so I think what the president is alluding to is that there are some individuals involved in the negotiations and in elements of their government, including some in elements of their military that are more open to a deal than other. As far as the Navy is concerned, yeah, they have no Navy. What they have remaining is a bunch of small crafts. I would call them Boston whalers with machine guns. And these things are harassing ships. And these are the ones that go after, in some cases, they drop mines off the back of them, or they try to harass shipping with swarms. They are unable to form swarms the way they once did. They are primarily now threatening shipping through the use of one-way attack drones. But their Navy, what you would consider a Navy with naval vessels that can actually conduct naval operations, is non-existent at this point.
So is the war still on or is the war off?
Well, Epic Fury has concluded. What you're seeing reports of, including last night, is the following. A ship will go through the route, particularly both the northern and southern route of Hormuz. Those ships will come under attack. The U.S. will respond to that attack by shooting down those drones that are trying to sink a commercial civilian vessel illegally and unlawfully. At that point, the Iranians will respond to that by targeting some facility in the region in retribution. On occasion, in order to protect our own forces, we don't just strike the drones, we strike the people who launch those drones. These are completely defensive in nature, and but they are happening in response to an Iranian action. If they don't shoot at those ships, we don't shoot. But we have to respond. You have a civilian commercial vessel transiting the straits, and they're being targeted by drones. And these drones are not like highly precise. They could hit any part of that ship and they could create, including an ecological disaster.
Well, apparently some kind of military exists that's shooting these drones off. And the military obviously isn't decimated.
Well,
they're attack these ships with these drones.
Yeah, they still retain a drone.
Say that what the president was alluding to, the president's not a person who's known for illusions. He just shouts it right out, whatever he's thinking. So I don't think he was alluding to anything,
Yeah.
as you suggest.
Well, drones are, as you know, a challenge in multiple battlefields around the world. It's going to be a tremendous challenge for warfighting in the future because they're cheap.
Yeah, I know what drones are.
I know you know what they are, but I'm saying that they're cheap and they're
Yes,
easy.
I know, and we're using things that are very expensive to shoot them down.
And that needs to change. That said, yes, they still have the capability to, they can't launch as many as they used to, and they can't launch them in the swarms they used to launch them in. But they still retain that capability.
Okay. Well, let me just ask you a quick question about something that Ambassador Barrack said, changing the subject a little bit. He compared Israel to Hezbollah for one thing. That was a pretty concerning comparison. But also he said Turkey should join the F-35 program. These comments are inconsistent with law and longstanding policy. And I'm just wondering what your position is as Secretary of State. Can Turkey get F-15s and F-35s or not? What if we seem to be helping the bad guys and not the good guys?
Well, as I'm sure you're aware, Turkey actually was in the F-35 program. The reason why they can't get them is because they purchased the S-400 system
That's right.
from the
They
Russians.
still have those, and they're still under mandatory sanctions.
Correct. So as you know, that's governed by statute.
Okay, or not?
Well, right now we don't have that choice because it's governed by statute, both provisions of the NDAA and the statute.
Out there saying that.
Well,
Representative's time has expired. Representative Perry is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'll give you an opportunity to answer the ranking member, even though he didn't pose it as a question. But I, as a individual, like many on the dais who have served in uniform, thank you for your actions regarding Iran and this administration's action. But if you want to answer it yes or no, you're welcome to. Who started the war between Iran and America 47 years ago?
Yeah, remember, these yes or no things I don't like, but I could just tell you, Iran has been at war against the United States since the minute the Islamic regime took over.
Yeah, and I feel the same way. And again, thank you on behalf and to honor the thousands and 10,000s of Americans who have been murdered or maimed by Iran. Thank you for honoring them. Just moving on to questions. Did Pakistan's foreign minister personally deliver a message to you that Iran is prepared to demonstrate a nuclear weapon should the current escalation continue? That's been reported, and I just want to see if I can ferret that out.
I've not seen that reporting, and I'm not aware of any such message.
Okay, and if there were such a message, would that change anything in America's posture, or not only the message, but the action? Would that change anything regarding our goals?
Well, I think the hypothetical question is, if Iran threatened that they're going to test a nuclear device if talks fail, I think it would confirm everything we believe about them anyways. And I think the president then would have to pursue or at least have to consider various other options that are available to him in that context. But again, I've not heard that message relayed. I don't know the reporting you're referring to. You're talking about a press report?
Yeah, I am talking about a press report.
I would be surprised if that message had been relayed. I would be aware of it if it was.
I would think so. That's why I'm asking. So that's enough on that. I know that the president, look, he's an America First guy. He's concerned about every single American citizen, regardless of their party affiliation or their ideology and affordability. The president is concerned about those things. And I shudder to think what Iran would do if they could, armed with nuclear capability and ballistic missile capability, coupled with that, seeing what they're doing right now, extorting the world economy without those things. So with that in mind, it's been reported that the UAE is building a pipeline to the Gulf of Oman, which would bypass the Strait of Hormuz, essentially doubling their capacity, which would, of course, lower the price and the risk of global fuel transport or oil transport. Do you understand or do you recognize and know what the timeline for a proposed timeline for completion of that pipeline is?
Yeah, I'm aware of those efforts. They actually pre-exist the conflict in terms of a desire to do so. These things, I can't tell you specifically. I'm not a pipeline building expert,
Right.
but I can tell you it certainly is going to take more than a week or a year. I mean, these are complex. I think the broader point, which your question touches on, is I do think you're going to see a reshifting of where the world gets its energy from in the aftermath of this conflict. You're already beginning to see some of it now. I think you're going to see the United States be a bigger energy provider to the Indo-Pacific. We have the capability to do so, but it's going to take some time to build that capability. So I think you're going to see more of that. And I think you're going to see the establishment of more of these alternative routes as a result of this. Remember, only about 20% of global oil goes through the Straits of Hormuz, but it is about 80 to 85% of the oil that goes to the Indo-Pacific. So in those particular countries, I think you're going to most definitely see them buying more from other places, including the United States.
And that's going to lower the cost for everybody, which is great. Secretary, just moving on, you're of Cuban descent, of Colombian descent. Can you describe, and Cuba has been a sore.
Are you really Colombian? I didn't know that.
Yes,
Oh, wow.
indeed. But Cuba has been sowing the seeds of discord in our hemisphere, inviting China, Russia, North Korea, all manner of communist, oligarch, bad actors into the hemisphere. What, if you could describe, generally speaking, what the policy where we're headed with Cuba as the United States of America? Where are we headed, and what do you envision being success, and how do we measure that?
In 56 seconds, I will tell you what we want for the people of Cuba is to be able to live in a normal country.
You're here.
I want them to live in a country that looks like the Dominican Republic, like Jamaica, like the Bahamas, like any of these other places where people can own their own business, people can vote for their own leaders. By the way, that's not my desire. That's the policy of the United States. That's enshrined in statute. Here's the problem. We're willing to do this through a diplomatic means. The problem we have is that country's not controlled by a government. That country's controlled by a military conglomerate that basically controls 70% of the nation's GDP, and none of the profits of that conglomerate goes into the public treasury. None of that money goes to build bridges and roads or to reinvest into their energy infrastructure. All of it goes to build more hotels for tourists that aren't coming and to line the pockets of the people that are involved. So that has to change. My question, I think we all can envision what we want Cuba to look like, and it doesn't have to happen from overnight. Okay, we understand they're not going to go from being what they are now to turning into Belgium or Switzerland in one day to the next. It takes time in these processes. I just don't believe, frankly, at this point, given everything we've seen, that the people in charge of that conglomerate and of that government are capable of making these reforms, at least not yet. Their mindset isn't there. Their incentives aren't there. They have spent, 60-something years waiting us out and holding on. And I think they can still get away with it, and they can't, and they won't be able to.
Time has expired. Representative Liu is recognized.
Thank you, Secretary Rubio, for being here today. You have been at multiple meetings with President Trump. In a moment, I'm going to show you a video of one of these meetings. It is from last December. It's a cabinet meeting. I'm going to ask you to focus on President Trump, and you will see that he is sleeping while you're talking.
Oh, my God.
Please show the video.
Products they make and what American farmers grow and produce has a fair shot to be sold around the world. On issue after issue, that's been the case. You talk about foreign aid reforms. This is not our money. This is taxpayer money.
Secretary Rubio, have you been at more than one meeting where President Trump has fallen asleep?
That's false. That's false. I've never seen him fall asleep. On the contrary, the guy doesn't sleep, which is a big problem because he calls me at 2 a.m. He calls me at 5 a.m. And, I like to sleep a little bit, maybe not 12 hours, but at least 6. So he works. The other day he was at the Oval Office until 12:30 p.m. 12:30 a.m. I don't know what you're talking about.
Secretary Rubio, I'm going to show you in a moment a video that shows you just lied to Congress.
Oh, okay.
So this is a video of a cabinet meeting literally from last month where Donald Trump is sleeping while you're talking. Please show this video.
A coalition of countries that line up behind the peace deal, behind the border peace, and it's still every day is a challenge, but it's been driven personally by the president. It's the reason why we're involved in this whole Ukraine-Russia conflict. That's not our war. It's not the president's war. This war started. It never would have happened if you've been president. But this war is going on, and the president is trying to end it.
You are literally talking about issues of war and peace, and Donald Trump is sleeping right next to you.
No, he's not.
If Donald Trump cannot stay awake at these important meetings where the cameras are rolling, imagine what he's like when the cameras are not there. So I'm going to ask you, have you been at classified meetings where Donald Trump has fallen asleep or had trouble staying awake?
I've never been at any meeting where, and the things you're showing me now, he was not falling asleep. And I think
so you're lying again. You're lying consistently to Congress. You're lying to Congress, Secretary Rubio. So I'm going to show you another video in a moment. The president's inability to stay awake on the job has caused other countries to perceive him differently. They mock him. They see he is weak and he is feeble. This is a video of a French news channel talking about Donald Trump falling asleep at a Memorial Day ceremony. Please show this video.
Well, Mark, a video that appears to show Donald Trump falling asleep at a Memorial Day ceremony this Monday has been circulating heavily online. And internet users have a lot to say about it. It's also reignited rumors about the state of the US president's health. Now, in the video, social media users say that Trump is fighting sleep whilst he listens to the speech given by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and that his eyes appear to be closed for a large portion of the ceremony. Now, we need to remember here that this is a ceremony to honor and remember those US military personnel who have died while serving in the armed forces. And the idea that Trump was asleep at a somber ceremony like this, well, that has triggered outrage online.
Donald Trump's inability to stay awake on the job shows that there's something very wrong with his health or cognitive abilities. And in fact, on a number of occasions, Donald Trump will contradict himself in literally the same meeting or interview. In this video I'm about to show, it shows that Donald Trump says the Iranian military is both destroyed and not destroyed at the same time, something that Dina Titus alluded to. Please show this video.
Of leadership, we've actually left the military alone. People would be surprised to hear that, because mistakes have been made in wars where you wipe out everybody and then you have a country that's, for 40 years can never rebuild. You look at what happened with Iraq. We did so. Iran is in a very bad position. They have no military. All they have is good talk, and they have a fake press.
So Secretary Rubio, instead of holding North Korean-style cabinet meetings where everyone goes around the room kissing Donald Trump's ass, I'm going to ask you to come clean with the American people and the White House as well. There's something wrong with Donald Trump's health or cognitive abilities. There's a reason he keeps going to the hospital and they keep giving him cognitive tests. We have not seen the president in 8 days. The American people deserve the truth. I yield back.
I don't even know how to respond to that, other than to tell you that it's absurd and ridiculous. And I can't believe we're in a Foreign Affairs Committee meeting in front of the House, an important time in American foreign policy.
Just keep lying, Secretary Rubio. Just keep lying.
Supposedly someone who thinks he's a medical expert when he's not. The truth of the matter is we had a cognitively impaired president in office a few years ago. That's a cognitively impaired president, but I don't like to talk about that because it weakens America. This president we have, this is a guy that literally doesn't sleep. He works day and night, long hours, every single day. I don't know if you haven't seen him in 8 days. I saw him yesterday. I didn't see him yesterday because I was in Congress the day before. I talked to him at all hours of the day and night. He works inhumane hours. Okay, I've been on foreign trips with the president that he doesn't sleep in the whole flight. And everyone else is sleeping on the plane, and he's, wandering the hallways looking for someone to wake up and talk to. That people are. So I don't know what you're referring to, but he has an incredible amount of energy. I'm just telling you, you may not like his policies. You may not like his policies, you may not like the decisions he's made, but I assure you, this is not a president that sleeps or is cognitively impaired in any way, shape, or form. And in fact, is incredibly active, much more so in many cases than much younger people that are around him. Those are facts. I see it every day. You're not going to agree because you have another narrative that you want to push, but those are the facts.
I just showed you 3 videos of him sleeping.
Representative Ice is recognized.
Thanks for waking me up, Mr. Chairman. The Secretary, if you'd gone to sleep during those videos, I would not have blamed you. I too have received those calls at all hours of the day and night. I'm, like you, aware that the president works harder than any other person here in Washington. But moving along, a number of things have been said that I find just incredible. First of all, the whole question on whether or not we support Lebanon and whether or not we support Israel. Is there any real contradiction between what Israel is trying to accomplish and what your aid to the Lebanese armed forces over decades is trying to accomplish?
Contradiction?
Is there any light between those two efforts?
They're aligned. What we would like to see is a Lebanese armed forces with the strength and the capability to disarm Hezbollah and reclaim the entirety of the country on behalf. The country should only have one armed forces. It shouldn't have an armed political party, which is what Hezbollah is, and then the Lebanese armed forces. So and the Lebanese want that too. And that's what we work very closely with them on, and that's what our engagement with the Lebanese is about.
And Mr. Secretary, just for the record, in one of the last times I was in Israel, I asked Prime Minister Netanyahu if we should cut off aid, as some have said, to Lebanon. He said to Lebanese armed forces, he said, no, give them more. Give them what they need to take back their country. So I do believe that We couldn't be more aligned with the efforts of Israel and the present government of Lebanon. Moving along, you did a great job of going around the world and outlining the mess that was left to you as you pick each of them up. One that you didn't touch on that I'm concerned about is actually a democratic one, which is the democracy of South Korea has taken a strong bent to the left, opening up more avenues toward China and, in fact, beginning to oppress many of our companies, including Meta, Coupon, and others. Can you tell us what can be done and what this committee should do with countries who, through democratic means, are beginning to become anti-U.S.?
Right. So there are a couple of points I would make. The first is that, and this is the unique aspect of dealing with democracies, and we see it in our hemisphere quite often. Sometimes in a democratic country, they will elect leaders that are friendlier to U.S. national interests, such as what we have now in Japan. And sometimes they will elect leaders that have a different perspective. We respect the sovereign choice of the people of that country. That's a legitimate election. That's who they chose. In those instances in which a democracy and their elected leaders are taking positions that run contrary to the national interests of the United States, it doesn't mean we want to overthrow the government or get rid of the government because it's a democratic government. It simply means we have to engage them in the fact that they are doing things that are irritants to our national interests. You point to some of our companies. Our companies aren't just facing challenges and, I would say targeting in South Korea. They're facing it throughout Europe. And the European Union, as an example, is targeting our technology companies and conducting what we believe is unfair. So I think this becomes a feature of our engagement with South Korea, even as we have things that we're strategically aligned on. These are areas we've expressed and I think have, frankly, impacted our ability to conclude a trade agreement with them because of some of their behavior towards American companies.
Iran obviously was going to dominate a part of today, and I'd like to close my questioning with a question for you. In 1979, if my math is correct, you were 8 years old when they took our embassy and then lied about it, claimed it was students doing it. That's 47 years ago, has been said many times. Is it fair to say that President Trump, no matter what the people on the other side of the aisle want to say, is not in the 60th or 70th day of action, but in fact in the 47th year of an ongoing war with Iran that has spread to Yemen, to Lebanon, and even to South and Central America?
I think I would start, well, absolutely. First of all, with Hezbollah. Hezbollah is an agent of the Iranians, and they've carried out terrorist operations around the world, including the recent anniversary of what they did in Argentina, the Jewish Center. But let's not forget those IEDs that were used to maim and kill our troops in Iraq were all innovated by Soleimani and the IRGC, which strongly supported that. Let's not forget that we have these Iranian proxy militias operating inside of Iraq that as recently as 2 months ago kidnapped an American journalist. And let's not forget that there are people that are both charged and convicted in the United States for participating in Iranian assassination plots against the president and against other former and current government leaders. So we've been facing this from Iran for 47 years in a variety of ways, some more open than others.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent that the Wall Street Journal article entitled "South Korea Takes a Hard Left Turn Against America" be placed in the record.
So ordered.
Thank you. I yield
Without
back.
objection. Representative Jacobs is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, good to see you. I'd like to talk about the war in Iran. Yesterday, in your Senate testimony, you told Senator Booker that the war in Iran is over. This is news to me. It's also news to my 2,500 constituents, Marines, San Diego Marines in the Middle East off the coast of Iran, the other of my constituents who are deployed there, and the thousands more of my constituents who have 48-hour deployment notices whose families are still very concerned. But okay, I will take you at your word. If the war is over, I have a simple question. Who won?
First of all, epic fury is over, which is what you would consider the war. That operation is
So you agree
concluded.
it's a war then?
No, those are hostilities. They called it a war.
Okay.
I'm just responding to the Senator
Mr.
Booker's
Secretary,
question.
you can change the name of the operation. It doesn't change the fact that the strait is still closed and my service
Yeah, but
members
that's
and all of our service members are still in
I know, but
harm's
that's
way.
not
The
what you
war
asked me.
is not over. But I'm agreeing with you. Okay, fine. We're taking you at your word. The war is over. Who won?
Well, first of all, you're not taking me at my word. It's a fact. We're no longer conducting sustained strikes inside of Iran to degrade their military because epic fury is over. The second point is on the question of who won. I can tell you this. We defined victory as destroying their defense industrial base, significantly reducing the number of missile launchers that they possess, significantly reducing their stockpile of drones. And we achieved all of those, in addition to destroying what they had left of an air force and wiping out their entire conventional Navy. Those are all gone. So I consider that victory, and we did too. And that was the purpose of Epic Fury.
Okay, well, good. Based on the metrics that you just said, okay, there's actually, our intelligence community has said that Iran is reconstituting its military industrial base faster than we had predicted. And analysts assess it still holds roughly 70% of its missile stockpile and 70% of its mobile launchers. The Strait of Hormuz was open before the war. It is now closed. We have lost 14 brave American service members. Over 400 are injured. And the Iranian regime remains largely intact, but now with a more hardline leader who has more incentive to try and get a nuclear weapon. So I guess I have to ask you again, Mr. Secretary, does this actually look like winning or losing to you?
Well, first of all, I don't know what intelligence assessments you're referring to. We wouldn't discuss intelligence assessments if they were real.
These have been publicly reported.
Well, they're publicly reported. Someone committed a crime, and by the way, is also lying. And this happens all the time. People manipulate intelligence and analysis for purposes of furthering a narrative. On your point about the regime is actually deeply fractured, which is why it takes 7 to 10 days to get an answer from them for anything. Meanwhile, they're
fractured, but still intact.
Well, intact in the sense they can't even reach agreements that they can get back to us. So I don't know how intact that is. What they have is people that are afraid to go into the streets. Their repressive operations have held people back, in addition to the fact they've cut off the internet. But this is a country right now in this regime that is facing hyperinflation, a completely devalued currency, hundreds of billions of dollars in damage to their military infrastructure. And frankly, they all of the pre-existing problems that Iran had in their economy, which is why people are protesting, are worse, not better.
Sure,
and they have to deal with that too.
Mr. Secretary, so you're saying we're winning because the Iranian economy has inflation, it's cost them millions of dollars a day in lost revenue, and because it's going to cost them billions of dollars to rebuild. Well, we are having inflation. It's already cost us an estimated $100 billion. Gas prices are up with no end in sight. The average family is paying an extra $450 on gas and could pay an extra $2,000 by the end of the year. The American people are not stupid, Mr. Secretary. We all know that this war is not over. Just last night, the U.S. and Iran exchanged fire again, this time over Karg Island. We still have not reached a deal, despite the president's promise that a deal is right around the corner. The president even said today the blockade could last until Labor Day. It's now day 97 of the war that the president said he wanted to end quickly. So I have one last question for you. Mr. Secretary, who won the 2020 presidential election?
I'm not here to answer a question. We're talking about 2020. This is a Foreign Affairs Committee.
Okay, great. You can't answer the question,
No,
even though we all know that President
Biden won. I don't answer the
won.
question because the Secretary of State, I do not participate in domestic
This is
political
not about
issues.
domestic political issues.
certainly
This is about our democracy.
You're asking me to opine, just like I don't do campaign
It
rallies.
seems like
I don't
you-
do because as
it's-
Secretary of State, we're not supposed to. That's been the long tradition of the department. And you should know that if you've been on this committee for any period of time.
Mr. Secretary, it seems like you have an issue admitting facts. You can't say that the president lost the 2020 election, just like you won't admit President Trump is losing this reckless war of choice, and just like you couldn't admit that the shoes the president bought you were too big. You clearly don't know what winning means, and not because the facts are unclear to you, it's because telling the truth would cost you your job, and the American people are entitled to a Secretary of State who tells them the truth even when the president doesn't want to hear it, and my constituents, our service members, deserve better. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I don't know what shoes she's talking about. What is she talking about?
Representative Burchett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you'd like to answer any of that.
Yeah, I don't know about the
I'll
shoes.
give
I mean,
you a
he gave me
minute.
some Florsheim shoes. They're actually pretty good. They fit fine. I don't know what she's talking about. And maybe that's what she's referring to.
Your shoes look very nice today, Mr. Secretary.
How can you see them? They're way down here. We're talking about shoes. Are you guys kidding me? I mean, is this the Foreign Affairs Committee or is this like a circus? What is this?
I think it's a
Let's go.
circus, but I appreciate you being here, Mr. Secretary. United States is NATO's largest financial contributor. Why does NATO consistently ignore our call to share more of the defense burden in Europe? And is it our national interest to continue participating in NATO?
Well, I can give you the why, okay? And the why is pretty, and is the following. Especially in Western Europe, for the better part of 20 or 30 years, they have not had to spend on defense. because the U.S. security shield has allowed them to instead spend their money on building up a very vast and robust social safety network. In my time as a senator and before that as a state representative, you would hear often from constituents about how come they have this and that in Europe and we don't have it here. Well, one of the reasons why is because these very rich countries were spending their money on social programs instead of defense because we were covering their defense. That paradigm has to shift. It has to shift for two reasons. The first is these are very wealthy countries that should have the ability to spend more to build up their defenses and need to. And this is not unique to President Trump. Multiple American presidents in both parties have complained about NATO burden sharing. This is just the first president that actually is doing something about it. The second point is the United States has global obligations. Just as I can leave a meeting with Europeans that want to talk about NATO, and the next meeting will be with someone from the Indo-Pacific that would like to see a greater U.S. military presence in the Indo-Pacific. And then you can talk to Gulf partners that want to make sure we're still committed to defending and being involved there. And then you can go to Africa and talk to countries that want to see our cooperation on counterterrorism. And then you can go to the Western Hemisphere where they want us to do more with them as well and pay more attention. So the U.S. has global obligations. And while we have vast resources, we do not have unlimited resources. We have to allocate them. And that will include constantly re-examining what our force posture looks like in Europe in comparison to other theaters and potential contingencies around the world.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I also wanted to thank you in the White House for supporting the bill that I've been pushing to defund the Taliban. You're very kind to me to meet with me, and I appreciate that very much, and the president's support as well. As you know, we're the UN's largest financial contributor, but it consistently pushes liberal policies like abortion and gender ideology in spite of our opposition. And every time there's a new council or whatever, it's always our enemies that seem to be on there. Why is the U.S. still a member of the United Nations?
Of the United Nations?
Yes, sir.
Well, twofold. I would say the first is the United Nations, of course, is a very frustrating thing for us, primarily because it's been unable to intervene or play a constructive role in most of the major crises around the world. It's lost its purpose, it's lost its mission. I think our UN mission is doing a very good job of driving substantial reforms at the UN and using our fees as leverage to achieve those reforms. Last year, actually, we had some pretty substantial successes, some real reductions in the size, in the bloated budget of the UN. And by the way, this is not just a US position. Multiple countries agree with us that the UN had grown too large and it lost its core mission. On the other hand, there have been instances, and we try to use the UN where possible as a viable forum in which to solve problems. It was helpful as a forum in the Security Council, for example, in standing up the new mission in Haiti, in which the U.S. contribution is dramatically reduced and partner nations around the world, because of the UN approval, are now able to step forward and provide not just money, but actual troops for the gang suppression force. Likewise, we have 130 some odd co-sponsors of a resolution, the largest number of co-sponsors ever for a resolution in the Security Council condemning what's happening in the Straits of Hormuz and authorizing countries to potentially do something about it. Unfortunately, it's facing a veto threat from China and Russia, so no vote has been scheduled on that yet. So there are organizations in the UN that we've partnered with. We've been able to partner with them on making contributions to humanitarian relief around the world. And we actually struck a pretty good deal with them in which we can ensure that that money is going to be spent in a way that furthers our national interest, not go to fund the NGO industrial complex, but also provide aid, critical aid to areas that badly need it. So there's been some utility with some of it, but the UN is in need of continued dramatic reform, and we intend to continue to use our fees that we owe, that they claim we owe, as leverage for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One last thing. Is there any mutual, anything UN and NATO could do that would be mutually beneficial? Any reforms?
But I'm sorry?
Any reforms that the UN and NATO could do that would be mutually beneficial?
Well, with NATO, it's a much deeper conversation that involves basing rights that have been denied to us by a handful of countries. And I think this is just it's going to feature prominently in the meeting in Turkey, as it did last week in the meeting with the foreign ministers. On the UN, I can provide you the list of the reforms we are asking for. They've imposed last year more reforms than ever before, but there are a few more that need to happen. And I can share that list with you and with the whole committee.
Representative Staten is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, I do want to talk to you about the blurring of lines between public service and private enrichment at the highest levels of this administration's foreign policy leadership. President Trump has placed Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner in charge of addressing some of the world's most intractable conflicts, including the war between Russia and Ukraine and cleaning up the president's self-made mess of war of choice in Iran. Let me start with Mr. Witkoff, Trump's special envoy to the Middle East. He co-founded the cryptocurrency venture firm World Liberty Financial alongside President Trump and President Trump's children. Days before President Trump's inauguration, a firm controlled by a member of the royal family of the United Arab Emirates, Sheikh Taqnoon, bought a 49% stake in the company. That was a $500 million investment. 31 million of that went straight to the Witkoff family. Witkoff was still a financial stakeholder in World Liberty as he was simultaneously leading high-level U.S. government negotiations in his role as special envoy. One of those negotiations was over the export of America's most advanced AI chips to the UAE, negotiations personally attended by Sheikh Taqnoon. In the spring, another company chaired by Sheikh Taqnoon, MGX, deposited $2 billion in World Liberty Financial's stablecoin, the single largest investment in the crypto company ever. Weeks later, the chip deal was announced despite national security concerns. Secretary Rubio, do you believe that Mr. Witkoff has an unacceptable conflict of interest?
I have never seen any evidence that he's made any decisions or advocated for any position that's to his personal benefit. On the contrary, and again, I can't speak to all the things you're saying now because that's not, Mr. Witkoff is an employee of the White House and he undergoes the ethics vetting and the procedures for disclosure that are appropriate to them, not to the State Department. But I would just add, I want to be fair, okay? I've never seen the guy ever say anything to me that makes me think this is personal rather than, the only thing he's ever done is spend his own money.
Yeah.
I know he has spent his own money at great personal expense to fly around the world on his own airplane, not on the government bill. He has done it, but everything out of his own pocket.
Are you concerned about the appearance of a conflict of interest in Mr. Witkoff?
I've never seen anything that leads me to have that concern. Again, you've cited a bunch of things. I'm just not aware of those but I'm just telling you my personal interactions with Mr. Witkoff are of a person who just thinks he's serving the country and is happy to do so, not out of any personal gain, but because he wants to serve the country.
As Secretary of State, who's in charge of the foreign affairs of the United States, have you spoken to President Trump about any concerns about conflict of interest with Mr. Witkoff?
I haven't had to. I've not seen any.
Let's talk about Jared Kushner. His private equity firm, Affinity Partners, has raised more than $6 billion since it was founded in 2021, including $1.2 billion just over the last year. Mr. Secretary, are you aware of how much of that $6 billion has been raised from foreign nationals?
I don't know anything about it.
The answer is 99%. These include sovereign wealth funds operated by Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar. The Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund is the largest investor in Affinity Partners. In fact, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman personally recommended that Saudi Arabia invest in Affinity Partners. The Crown Prince has also personally urged President Trump in multiple phone calls to continue the ongoing war of choice in Iran. Let's put it another way. The man who bankrolled Kushner's business venture is the same man who is lobbying for the war Kushner is tasked with ending. Mr. Secretary, same question. Are you concerned about any conflict of interest by Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law?
Again, in Jared's case, Jared is a private citizen who's been advising and participating in this voluntarily. He's not compensated for it or in any way. But I've never seen from either Steve or Jared on the contrary. All I've ever seen them do is put tremendous amount of time and energy into trying to solve problems, like the amount of time they put into Gaza and the Board of Peace and all of that process. I think
Secretary,
I believe they've done it out of the kindness and goodness of their heart. They think they're serving the country.
The goodness of their heart. Mr. Secretary, what Jared Kushner said on 60 Minutes on this very issue, when asked about it, he says, what people call conflict of interest, Steve and I call experience and trusted relationships that they have throughout the world. Reclaiming my time, let's recap. The two men tasked with resolving this country's most sensitive national security issues, including meeting with Iranian negotiators, are profiting off the same countries that they are engaging with. One thing we know for sure, while the Ukraine peace talks are going nowhere and the war of Iran has no end in sight, Witkoff and Kushner are making out like bandits. Meanwhile, a gallon of gas is still hovering about $4.67 in Phoenix, Arizona, that I represent, up nearly 40% from just 18 months ago. The American people are paying more for gas, for groceries, for everything. They're footing the bill while representatives of our government are cashing in. I yield back.
Representative Jackson is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Secretary Rubio, for being here today. Thank you for your work to execute an America First foreign policy that is making America safer, stronger, and more prosperous. From confronting the corruption of the Maduro regime to negotiations with Iran to stabilize the Middle East, you have played a crucial part in spearheading the administration's Peace Through Strength initiative. Secretary Rubio, I want to reiterate what you wrote in your opening statement, that American leadership should always be on behalf of American interests. Thanks to President Trump's historic foreign policy initiatives, the USA has no longer sit idly by as other nations take advantage of American funds and military support. My question: global commerce and diplomacy rely on coordinated strategies with allies to combat illicit trade and support U.S. exporters. To support the Trump administration's efforts to enhance U.S. national security while advancing strategic American investments, I recently introduced the Strategic Export Controls and Border Security Enhancement Act. This bill would codify the State Department's Office of Export Controls and Border Security to strengthen the operational capabilities of allied countries to better protect U.S. critical technologies from diversion and misuse by our foreign adversaries. Secretary Rubio, how is this office being utilized to prevent the illicit trafficking of sensitive and dual-use technologies? And how do you see this office being used to advance America First diplomacy moving forward?
Yeah, I think at the core of what you're trying to get to with your bill, and we're trying to get through with our sources, with our resources, is as follows, and that is that you will say you can't sell a certain product, or a certain product can't be exported because it provides it would be the detriment of the national interest of the United States. But it's prohibited for one country, but it's not prohibited for some other country. They will then set up a company in a third country and use that to evade the sanctions. In essence, you will find a company, let's say it was a sanction against a transfer of technology to a Chinese company that's linked to their military. But they will then figure out a way to set up a company in a third country, in a country that's not barred for export. And they will use that vehicle and that route in order to be able to export a valuable technology. And so what we're trying to get at through our efforts is identifying those countries where that is happening and those companies that are being used for that purpose. And I think your bill, though I haven't read it, sounds like what it would do is it would codify this effort so that it exists beyond this administration.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm anxious to partner with you from a legislative standpoint on that. So if there's anything in the bill when you do see it that you would recommend, please let me know. Under this administration, the Foreign Service has refocused its diplomatic corps on merit and performance. The State Department has eliminated internal DEIA programs, slashed woke investments, and neutered NGOs that were working against U.S. national interest. We finally have got away from trying to force other governments to adopt the crazy woke social agenda of the failed Biden administration, the same agenda still being promoted by many of the progressive Democrats on this committee, unfortunately. And we are now ushering in a new era of American efficiency and strategic diplomacy. Mr. Secretary, how can this committee continue to provide the State Department with the tools in the upcoming Foreign Service Act reauthorization to advance President Trump's American First agenda and continue this progress?
I mean, I think codifying these policies are important so that they exist for the long term. And I wanted to say one thing when it comes to the issues that people use the term diversity, or the Foreign Service will always be diverse in comparison to maybe some other agencies, simply because foreign service and international diplomacy often attract people that are first generation or maybe even immigrants themselves. They have language skills, they have cultural skills or what have you that sort of attract them to diplomacy to begin with. I think you see it reflected in their ambassadorial posts around the world as well, the ones the president has nominated and so forth. I would also add something that's very unique to the State Department, which other agencies don't have. The majority of our employees, over 47,000 of our total employees, about 70,000, 47,000, are locally employed. These are nationals of other countries that work for us, and they're a key part of our missions. We couldn't carry out our mission function in many of these countries without these locally employed individuals that are not even American citizens, but they're valuable resources. They've been there for 15 or 20 years. So in and of itself, I would say the State Department, but ultimately we want to hire the best people for the job. And that's what we should always want. We want to hire the best people for the job, the ones who are most capable of doing the job. And I think we can do that and still have a very diverse workforce, but not because of the diversity, but because of their skill, their merit, and their abilities.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Representative Jackson is recognized.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Secretary Rubio. Great to see you again. Thank you for your forceful words in support of diversity, although there are some conflicting claims to what it means. Secretary Rubio, I stand before you not simply as a legislator, but as a witness to a moment in our nation's history when we are threatening to sever the sacred connection between our national interest and our moral obligation. This is a budget hearing, of course, but more than numbers on a page, we have to wrestle with the meaning of what those numbers mean to the lives of real people in real places, whose very existence is bound in no small way to the decisions that we make in this room. I want to start by showing the American people what the dismantling of the diversity, equity, and inclusion means. Under your leadership, we are abandoning the continent of Africa. Would you put this up, please? The question is not what can we afford, but what we are willing to become. Under your leadership, the U.S. effectively has closed 31 consular operations across Africa and has 34 ambassadorships vacant. Under your leadership, we froze student, refugee, and valid visa processing to 26 African nations. Under your leadership, we have raised the tariffs on 30 emerging economies. Under your leadership, we have pulled out of the pandemic and healthcare aid for over 40 countries. Our diplomats used to operate in every region, culture, and society on earth. A workforce that reflects the diversity of our country is not a political objective. It is indeed, as well as you know, a strategic advantage, as you articulated. Africa and other developing nations are fast-growing and young populations represent one of humanity's greatest opportunities for shared prosperity, climate resilience, and democratic transformation. On global health, last year, the Trump administration cut off all funding to the World Health Organization. However, to prevent diseases from reaching our shores, the U.S. still needs the global outbreak and disease surveillance functions that the World Health Organization offers. Diseases, as you know, do not need passports or visas. In March, the Washington Post reported that the administration is proposing to spend more than $2 billion a year to recreate a system that you dismantled, such as laboratories, data sharing networks, and rapid response systems that you abandoned when you withdrew from these programs. This is more than 3 times what we had contributed to the World Health Organization. That's waste, fraud, and abuse. How is reinventing the wheel at a significantly higher cost efficient for the American people? You know that, let me just answer that. Since Eastern Congo and Uganda are currently experiencing the 3rd largest outbreak since it was discovered half a century ago, and your response was to criticize the World Health Organization that you had retreated from. Your statement in the administration's action revealed a retreat from our responsibility, a shrinking of the vision of America, and a devastating abandonment of those who have long looked to the U.S. not as a savior, but as a partner in the difficult work of survival and dignity. Moving forward, we would have questions on how the Trump administration plans to address global health crisis, if that is something the United States still wishes to have leadership in. Prior to 2026, U.S. global health was a model for the world. Its initiatives helped contain more than 250 diseases across more than 40 countries. But DOGE and this administration have not told the truth. They told the American people these cuts were necessary, because I can assure you there's nothing necessary about denying medicine when people are suffering. There's nothing justified in weakening initiatives like PEPFAR and the Global Fund. I'll give you some time, which have stood as shining examples of what this country can achieve when it chooses compassion over indifference. As we look at the HIV crisis, and specifically in Zambia, according to a draft memo that was shared with you, prepared for you by the State Department and African Bureau staff, something that you care about, you considered withholding life-saving assistance to 1.3 million people with HIV in Zambia to force the government to sign a deal giving the U.S. more access to critical minerals. You consider it acceptable to use life-saving HIV/AIDS treatment as leverage for economic advantage? And in closing, over the Easter weekend, I was in Cuba doing an oversight to see, and your State Department refused to meet with members of Congress while they were out gallivanting and partying. In closing, I would like to ask you, will you invade Cuba? I yield back.
Well, I have 1 second to answer. What do? I mean, you guys tell me your rules here. I tried to write down all the
Will
stuff
you
said,
invade
but
Cuba?
Well, that's not the only thing you said. What
Mr.
else?
Secretary, I'm going to take my time to ask questions at this time, and I'll give you some time to answer.
Okay, because I do want to answer a lot of the points you raised.
So my questions are going to bear on this. I think there is a significant difference in the State Department today, and since you've taken the reins, versus the State Department under Secretary Blinken and under President Joe Biden. I'd like you to expand upon the changes that have been conducted. I think it's also incumbent for us to speak about things that just not everybody follows these things all day. I spoke about these things a little bit in my opener. The amount of attacks that have come against the United States of America by the hand of Iran, not in 47 years, just in the last 30 months prior to Epic Fury beginning. I referenced over 350 attacks, 200 wounded, multiple Americans dead, to include Specialist Moffett, Specialist Sanders, Specialist Rivers. We have been ongoingly attacked by Iran just recently. And the United States has largely done nothing about it. I think one of the things that's changed about us is that we are not going to be an America that gets attacked and pretends it never happened, ignores it, does nothing. That was a way of the past. So, Secretary Rubio, I'd love for you to discuss this and discuss the questions that were asked previously, and you have 3 minutes and 45 seconds to do
Okay,
so.
good. And I actually think they dovetail because there's a couple points. First of all, it's just absolutely false that we've abandoned the continent of Africa. As I've highlighted multiple times here on the diplomacy front, we are deeply engaged in the DRC and Rwanda peace negotiations. In fact, if it wasn't for us, there wouldn't be any negotiations. We are deeply involved in the Quad effort with Sudan that involves the UAE on one side, Saudi Arabia on the other, and it's deeply complicated that we actually have helped host donor conferences. So we are very involved in all of those issues. As I pointed out earlier, we've been working very cooperatively with the government in Nigeria to go after a common threat, terrorists that want to aim at us but are threatening the nation state there now. And by the way, we're opening new areas of relationship like Equatorial Guinea, which is a country we really hadn't had much interaction with for many years. And now that's begun to flourish, and hopefully we can build upon that. In the case of the consular services, we've consolidated consular operations all over the world. And one of the reasons why is you can do it more efficiently. There are areas where literally the number of either visas that are not accepted or even applicants do not justify having a full-time station. We've done this repeatedly, not just under this administration, but previous administrations have done that. And so consolidation of consular services is not unique to the African continent. We've seen it in Mexico, where we're going to close one consulate because the cost-benefit analysis doesn't add up. On the World Health Organization, they basically covered for China during the COVID pandemic, openly covered for China, refused to disclose the reality of what was happening soon enough, and didn't put the blame quickly enough on where it belonged. But not just the blame, it didn't allow researchers to be able to begin the work of, it took longer than it should have to develop a vaccine and other things because of their attitude towards that. And we have deep problems with the way the World Health Organization seems to play politics was on behalf of some countries, and we pointed that out. Now, let me talk about a couple other things you raised. The Global Fund. The Global Fund is very happy. You should call them. They're very happy with us. They put out multiple statements about the work we're doing with them. We are fully compliant.
Assertions, Chairman?
It's my time.
No, but I'm just telling you, the Global Fund, we are, for example, it was a 33% cap on what we give. The rest has to come from other donors. We are at that level right now. And if donors give more, we'll give more. We're committed to that. They're very happy with what we have worked out with the Global Fund. I think the other thing you didn't point out is we are not abandoning these countries or these programs. We're entering into compacts, 32 compacts, the majority of them in Africa, in which we go to a country and say, look, rather than force a bunch of NGOs from Northern Virginia on you, we are going to work with you. We are going to give the money government to government, and we're going to work in cooperation with your government to build up your national health system. So not only can you care for the patients you have now, but ultimately you won't have this problem for 5 or 10 years. And they want that. They welcome that. They do not want the ongoing dependency of aid. These countries clearly want to establish their own systems.
Come over here because of these.
Representative Jackson, you're not recognized.
I know, but on Zambia, look, we're not threatening them with anything. They just don't want to sign a compact. But you do raise an interesting point, not specific to Zambia, but broadly. Okay, there are a lot of countries we give a bunch of money to. You sit there and you say, okay, we donate $50, $80 million a year to this country. We do all the aid for that country. But all of the contracts, all of the rare earth minerals, all of the financial benefits, all of the commercial deals are with China. So explain to me, how is that good for the American people that we are in a country that we take care of all of their problems, but then all the economic benefits flow to China or some other country? That has to be talked about. How can I justify to the American people that we flood a country with American aid, but all of the commercial benefits in that country go to China or someone else over us? That is a legitimate thing to discuss with every country in the world that we give a lot of aid to. That is the reason why aid should not be separated from policy, because it has to reflect our national interest.
Thank you, Secretary Rubio. Representative Kamlager-Dove.
So, Mr. Secretary, 5 months ago, you essentially became the new overlord of Venezuela, taking control of the country's oil revenues and giving foreign companies access to its oil and minerals. But you have provided no real transparency about where the money is going and who is benefiting from this arrangement. I want to now talked more recently making $1 billion in investments and is trying to get contracts. And why is he texting Delcy Rodriguez on the regular? Who is he working for?
Okay.
I'm gonna allow you to respond. I'm setting this up because it looks unseemly that essentially you are taking Venezuelan oil money and sending it through a network of campaign donors, corrupt politicians, and lobbyists, and we can't get any documentation on that. We don't have any receipts. So the question is anyone from the administration, directly or indirectly, benefiting from the contracts being doled out in Venezuela?
Is this where I get to answer?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Number one is the number of people. Mauricio is one of many people that are involved in what's happening in Venezuela. There's not a day that goes by that we don't have someone who's interested in what's happening in Venezuela for a variety of reasons. Nor is he the only person in the United States that directly contacts Delcy Rodriguez and others. There is a stampede of people that want to be involved in Venezuela. Mauricio is one of many, but by the way, not involved in Venezuela. I am not knowledgeable or know of any financial links he has to anybody in Venezuela.
So I'm going to reclaim my time, Mr. Secretary, but I'm glad that you said that, because you have said these things. You have shared these talking points before.
They're not talking points.
But it is hard to take your word for it when this is the most corrupt administration in American history.
Well,
we're talking
opinion.
pardons for sale. We're talking about no bid contracts to those on Trump's family and friends plan. We're talking about a $1.8 billion slush fund. And I think that's corruption. The American people think that's corruption. They want to know if you think that's corruption.
Okay. Number two, this goes right to the point of transparency. You're absolutely wrong about the way the money flows. It's pretty straightforward, and I'll share.
So I'm going to have to reclaim my time again, because the
what
question
kind of process
about
is this? They get to ask questions and you don't get to answer?
It's my time. The question
I don't know
about
about you. When
corruption
is it
is
my
really
time?
important.
So why am I
because
here if I don't
you
get to answer
can't
your
call
questions
out-
or your defamatory
I'm
statements?
reclaiming my time,
Reclaim.
Mr.
I want
Chair.
you to, but I want to reclaim. Well, do I get time?
This
Because you
is
make
my
these
time,
defamatory
Mr. Chair.
statements and no one can talk here.
If
This
you
is crazy.
can't call out corruption in this country, then how can you call it out in another
Well, I can't say
country?
anything 'cause you
That
won't
is
let me
the
speak.
question. It is about credibility and your credibility. And your credibility meter is on empty right now. This
See,
oil.
these guys
Who
just get to talk and I don't get to
who
answer?
determines the barrels of oil that get sold?
What?
How
But you
many
won't let
of them?
me
At
answer your
what
question. I
price
have an
does it
answer
get
for your
sold?
question.
Where is it going?
Oh, I get
will
it. They
let
have to
you.
use their time for me to answer
The
your
onus
question.
is on you to
a
prove
joke.
that there is no corruption happening.
Well, how do
That
I
is
prove it if
your
you don't let me talk?
responsibility as the Secretary of State. And you know what? Normally we would have access to that data. That's the
You do.
transparency.
You just don't know where
but
to
you're
look.
not showing us any receipt. Well, then show us.
But
do you
you won't.
commit? Do you commit to coming back here with whoever the person is who is monitoring the sales of the oil? Bring them before this committee.
Can I
Show the
reclaim my
receipts.
time?
Have the documentation. You don't have this time yet. I am talking about your credibility and evidence, not your talking points, because talking points are never a replacement for transparency
I agree,
and
but that's what you're
documentation.
saying. You're saying talking
And
points
we
without an
have
answer.
we are 5 months into this and no audits. Zero visibility into the
100%
contracts that are
false.
awarded.
100%.
Zero
Unfortunately,
transparency about where the
Representative's
money
time has
is
expired.
going.
Representative Salazar is recognized.
Yes, and giving contracts with no transparency
Can I
is
borrow your
exactly the
time to
reason
answer?
why you shut down USAID. So practice what you preach. I yield my
Oh,
time.
she gets to scream now too?
Chairman,
Scream
can
and
we
shout.
take down her words?
I'll give you some time. I'll give
Yeah.
you some of my time. And you just
Okay.
just
Oh God,
change
what
the
kind of thing
energy.
is this? What is this? You get asked questions for 5 minutes and you don't get time to answer. It's not a hearing.
I think you said clown
Like
show
a dunk
before.
tank.
I
What
don't,
is
I don't
this?
have to tell you. I don't.
I've even used their time. How can I answer the question? They don't even give me time. I've had to use their time to answer your questions.
Yes.
All right, whatever.
All right, so I don't need to tell you that in my community, the city that I represent, the city of Miami, you're one of the most illustrious representatives, and that we're very proud of you, not only the Cuban Americans, but the Hispanic Americans in my
Why is she leaving? I'm going to answer her questions.
I will.
Oh, she's going. Okay, I got it. Well, thank you for coming.
All right, so we're going to talk about, I just want to give you time to answer and then talk about Venezuela and talk about Cuba. So let's go back to Venezuela. Let's start with that. You said that stabilization, recovery, and transition. Those are the three steps that the State Department was going to implement in Venezuela. I believe that transition is the free and fair elections. The Venezuelan has a very robust opposition forces. We have Maria Corina Machado. So the big question here is that in order to avoid any type of misunderstandings like the one that we were hearing from my illustrious colleague, is that we should have free and fair elections that will bring rule of law, and the rule of law will then be able to bring in a lot of investments from the United States with transparency. Why can we not start right now the process of sending the message that we are going to establish, let's say next year, at the end of next year, a free and fair election sponsored with the United States or by the United States?
Yeah, thank you. Well, it all ties together, so I'm going to try to use the...
It all ties together,
okay.
Correct.
So let me first say about the oil stuff, which is a bunch... I don't even remember half the stuff that was being screamed at me because most of it, not entirely, is false. Here's what happens. When there are sales of oil from Venezuela, they used to, sell it at a discount because of sanctions, and they had to do all kinds of evasive matters. Now they're able to sell it at market price to great benefit to the Venezuelan people. That money and those proceeds are deposited in a treasury blocked account at Citibank. That account, by the way, is audited by KPMG. KPMG has been hired and paid by the Venezuelan government out of those funds to audit every single expenditure. There is a list that's been agreed to by both sides, the Venezuelan side and the US side, on what the allowable expenditures are for. So for example, they've used 250.
I need to go to 3 other countries, so I'm not sure what the chairman wants to do, but I understand that you're answering her question.
Oh, but this is but it's tied to your point because
right.
I'll be able to do the other ones quickly thereafter. Again, I know this is outrageous because I have to use your time to answer questions.
That's correct, but I need to serve the community. I need to ask you about other countries. So
well, bottom line is the money that's spent in Venezuela is audited by KPMG. It only goes to certain determined points, and it doesn't go to the individual benefit of anybody. Those are just false, outrageous
So when can we pivot to free and fair elections?
So the second point is on the transition phase, which is the third phase. The second is stabilization and recovery. Part of the recovery phase is creating the conditions for a free and independent press. You need to have independent press in order to have free and fair elections. We've seen an uptick in that activity. It's not 100% there, but it needs to continue to grow. You need to give space for the political parties to organize and to mobilize, because you can't participate in an election if you haven't had the time to do so. And you need a new electoral commission. We've said that repeatedly.
And when
that
are
needs
we
to happen.
starting?
Well, we'd like to see it as soon as possible, but the reality, just remember, it's been 5 months, not 5 years,
Correct.
not 50 months, 5 months. 5 months is not a long time for a country that had gone through what that country went through. But clearly, we need to have a new electoral committee, and ultimately, Venezuela's future is free and fair multi-party elections.
Correct. Let's go to Cuba. We know that your office is talking to the Castro family, and you're sending the message that the game is over, that they need to open up the democratic game. We know that. All right. So the question is, what's delaying that process?
Well, it's not that it's delaying the process. We've had conversations. We have diplomatic engagements with the Cubans consistently over time, over multiple reasons, and for many reasons over the years. In fact, the CENTCOM was just down at the fence line in Guantanamo, not CENTCOM, SOUTHCOM, over the weekend as well. Our message to them has been very clear. If they want a path in which they can recover their country and
But we
save
understand that they are not understanding that. So then
correct.
what's next? So what can we do in order to make them understand that the game is over?
Well, we're not going to allow them to benefit from the game that they've been playing, in which they're stealing money from the Cuban people to the benefit of this conglomerate at the expense of the people of Cuba. What we are offering to do is distribute $100 million in humanitarian aid to a non-governmental organization. Well, now they say they've accepted it, but they created
impediments. It has to
impediments.
go through the Catholic Church, and they're not willing
And
to do
others,
that.
Samaritan Purse. We have a whole host
Representatives
of organizations that are prepared to do it.
Representative Costa is recognized.
Thank you very much, Chairman and Mr. Secretary of State. Appreciate your presence. A lot of area to cover, but I'm concerned about America's president's and the international arena that we live in today. Ronald Reagan once described America as being the shining city upon the hill, one that other countries sought to emulate. You're familiar with that quote. I'm worried that our smart power that underpins our global standing, gives us credibility, clout, and coherence, is today in a democratic recession. That's my view. And I think American leadership is more important than ever before, and I think it's lacking. Do you agree that our smart power remains an important tool of our U.S. statecraft?
Well, absolutely.
But we're vacating the field. 2/3 of our ambassadorships posts are empty. Our alliances, we hit our friends with tariffs, berate our partners for not supporting a war that they were not ever brought into in Iran, and only later walk back the plans to withdraw troops from our European allies. On foreign aid, we've scrapped USAID and dismantled our global humanitarian networks. And in the vacuum, as you know, China has come into that breach. I want to talk. We have a deal. This is, I think, a good example. You've not granted final approval on $14 billion arms deal for Taiwan, which I want to emphasize was a sale, not a gift. Do you think that protecting Taiwan is still important?
It is. We gave them we had an $11 billion sale, the single largest in history, just in December.
But it's not a gift; it's a sale. And why are we withholding? Why are we withholding the $14 billion?
We're not withholding. It's just under review still. It has, but we just executed one in December, which was more than Biden did in 4 years.
Let's move on to NATO. The president's described as a paper tiger, and he's made no hidden about his disparaging comments about our allies, which I think are dangerous. That undermines the longest, the strongest alliance that we've had post-World War II. Do you think that NATO is a paper tiger?
The big website?
Do you think NATO is
I think NATO's in need of deep reform, and part of the reason,
but I mean, that reform's taking place. I mean, we can talk about it, and you ought to be able to take some credit for this. Look at Poland's up to 5.0, their GDP for defense.
Poland's not the problem.
Well, a lot of these, but we're working on this and we're making progress. Would you not agree?
I don't agree. I think
you don't agree that we're making progress?
Well, I agree we're making progress with some countries, but others are saying their 5% or even their 3.5% includes, for example, pensions to veterans. That's not defense spending.
Well, of course not. But I mean, I don't think that the confidence and the support that used to be a part of that transatlantic partnership is still there today. And you go to Europe and I go to Europe and we sense that in the people that we talk to. Let's move over to Ukraine. I've spent a lot of time and engagement there. I know you have. You talked about it earlier today. 4 years ago, it was seen about good versus evil, right? Russia's invasion of a country that was unprovoked. And there was strong bipartisan perception that was the case. A year ago, the president indicated that Ukraine had no cards to play anymore. I think that President Putin, today, modern Russia is a syndicate masquerading as a country with a mob boss called Putin. He bombs hospitals, schools, churches, kidnaps over 20,000 Ukrainian children. And yes, we have leverage, but we're backing out of our economic commitment there, our military commitment. And but yet we see these brave Ukrainian people standing up for their sovereignty and actually taking a whole new page out of warfare in terms of something that we could learn from. When is the president and the administration going to use the leverage that we have over Russia?
We have, and unfortunately, the talks have not yet borne fruit. But I want to disagree on something. So we continue to sell weapons through the Pearl program, which has been a great success. That's an ongoing program with Ukraine, and we continue to have massive number of sanctions on Russia as we speak. The problem has been
we've put the sanctions on and off again.
No, most of the sanctions are still on. The only one that's been waived for a limited period of time in order to provide more oil to the global market and stabilize prices is oil, and those are time determinate. These are 60-day waivers. These are not permanent.
Is it the intention to re-engage in the efforts to form a ceasefire and a peace agreement?
Oh, we're prepared to do so. Unfortunately, those efforts proved less than fruitful. We spent a year on it last year, but we're prepared to do it as soon as they're prepared to do it. that offer. We've made it repeatedly. We're ready to go. We're
I
prepared
think
to
more
play
to be
that role.
continued, but thank you very much for your time.
Representative Huizenga is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Rubio, good to be with you. And while we're addressing all the important issues like your shoes, I just want to formally invite you to DJ my next event. I would recommend maybe DJ Overlord be your new nickname. I apologize for many of my colleagues here because you're right, they're not giving you the opportunity to answer extremely important questions. I'm going to hit a number of issues very quickly. Coidoy prison in Venezuela. I believe yesterday you were quoted as saying that it had been closed down. I've got some close friends, contacts there that believe that there are still 25 prisoners that are still there. So I don't ask you necessarily to address it, but I'd love for you to take a look at that and get
Just
get
to be
back
clear,
us.
the interim government has said they intend to close it, and we will hold them to their promise.
Please do, and make that as rapid as possible. Along the lines of where Dr. Jackson was talking, Ronnie Jackson, one way we've maintained our lead regarding the AI arms race is cutting off China's access to essential chip-making tools made in America and by our allies. Unfortunately, the Netherlands and Japan continue to sell their critical tools, while here in the U.S. we maintain stricter controls. Those exemptions continue to be exploited by the allies today. Do you agree that export controls on chip-making equipment play a critical role in constraining the CCP's AI and military ambitions, and that allies should not be allowed to exploit exemptions to those controls?
Correct, and that features prominently in all of our engagements with the countries you just mentioned.
All right. Shifting gears, last November, President Trump hosted all 5 Central Asian presidents. I happen to chair the South and Central Asia subcommittee for the C5+1 summit. That was a historic movement. And what I would like to know is, do you recommend that Congress send a strong signal to the U.S.'s commitment to Central Asia by repealing the Cold War era Jackson-Vanik Amendment, which only serves to chill U.S. investment in the region?
Absolutely, we want that repeal. We think it would be helpful.
And what would be the positive steps? What are those?
I think
next
it would
steps?
signal that these impediments that have existed in the past and being able to deal with these countries commercially are being removed. So this came up in my confirmation hearing, and I don't know what the holdup has been, because every committee I go to, they ask me why. Everybody seems to agree they want to get rid of it, but no one gets rid of it. So you should. And by the way, we intend to have a C5+1 meeting that I'll be attending at some point this year in the region.
Wonderful, and they will be thrilled to have that. And then you recently, you recently returned from visiting India. India is a critical economic and security partner for the U.S. across the Indo-Pacific. Could you please share with the committee the outcomes of your recent visit and how the Trump administration is strengthening the partnership while simultaneously addressing longstanding market access issues?
Well, so India is an important strategic ally of the United States. We do a lot of things together, and there's tremendous opportunities to do more. The 2 points we focused on are, one is the hopes that we can wrap up the negotiations on our trade agreement, which we think we're a few weeks away from being able to conclude. Obviously, I don't negotiate those. That's a USTR function. So I refer you to them as to the timing of it, but we think we're pretty close in getting that done, and both sides want to see it done. The other reason I was there was, in addition to the bilateral meetings, we were able to host a meeting once again of the foreign ministers of the Quad, which is the cooperation between the United States, Australia, Japan, and India. And there are a number of things we're working on, and now we have actionable items that we're beginning to focus on. There'll be a new port facility in the region that we're going to work together on for one of the small Pacific islands. I think that is an important show.
Can you name which one?
Well, I think we're talking to Fiji right now about the ability to be involved with them. And then the second is, I hope I didn't misspeak on that, but I believe that's the case. And on the second one that we are working together on,
Trust me, somebody in the media will hold you accountable.
well, we'll get but the second one that I would tell you is that one of the things we've agreed to work on is domain awareness, working together and pooling our resources so we can have domain awareness about what's happening out in the sea. Is there someone out there trying to impede traffic? Is there someone messing with undersea cables? Is there, sanctioned ships that are moving through? This domain awareness is critically important. If we can pool the resources of these 4 countries, it would be a benefit to the region writ large.
Thank you. And I'll just leave one last comment. It's been my observation going back to whether it's Russia, Iran, other places that have been bad actors. Sanctions are only as good as your willingness to enforce them. And we are finally seeing this administration, with your advocacy and others, and Treasury to enforce those sanctions. Anthony Blinken sat there where you are not that long ago, and I had to remind him he had a problem on his hands because I'm vice chair of the Financial Services Committee. There's a number of Financial Services Committee members who are on this committee. We actually write the sanctions, and he basically would come in and say, don't worry your pretty little head about all these confusing sanctiony things. We got a handle on it.
Representative
You
Stein is
finally do.
expired.
Thank you. That you
Representative Almo.
Secretary Rubio, welcome back. I want to start where we left off last year. You told me, quote, we're going to do more food aid than any country on the planet times 10. That was your promise. But the facts tell a different story. America might still be the world's largest food aid donor, but we certainly don't provide 10 times more food aid than our peers. In fact, under your watch, America's food aid contributions have been cut by more than half to roughly $2 billion. It should be very clear that America's strength has never come solely from our might. It comes from our alliances, our credibility, and our values. You didn't just eliminate programs, created vacuums. Vacuums where violence and instability are rising, that extremist groups are filling, that competitors like China are exploiting, and vacuums that are making Americans less safe and less prosperous. And you hurt Americans here at home with your policy decisions. Shuttering USAID wiped out more than 23,000 American jobs while Donald Trump and his billionaire buddies got rich off of corrupt deals. Peanut farmers in Texas and sugar farmers in your home state of Florida lost market access because of your cuts. So Secretary Rubio, before slashing food aid programs, did you conduct any analysis whatsoever on how many American jobs would be lost, how many farms would be hurt, and how much damage would be done to local economies and small businesses?
Well, because we know all of those will still be part of the new programs we've created and are creating. But the second point I would make, American foreign aid programs are not a jobs program. Although they employ Americans and we want it to be helpful to Americans. And that's why
So you're okay hurting the farmers in your home state?
The World Food for Peace program, for example, now we've transferred it to U.S. The Agriculture Department. They're in a better position.
Well, you're talking about a hypothetical future where you fix past mistakes, but farmers have been struggling over the
That's
last
where it
year.
belonged in the first place because it's helpful. The farmers have more direct input there than they would at the State Department. As to your point about us cutting aid, not only are we we donate more than the next 4 countries combined. We do more than anybody else.
But we went down and there are consequences. Look, from where I sit.
But why are we in charge of feeding everybody?
This is not about charity. This is about our economy and values. I didn't say that you got to do it all, but you can't cut when you know without analysis that bad things are going to happen.
We replaced. We have new programs that are actually working better.
Well,
It's getting food to
Mr.
people.